All right, we'll go ahead and get started today. Thank you everybody for attending the AKS Office Hours. Kendall will not be here today. She had another engagement. Also, news, Kendall will be leaving the GBB team to join the Container Apps product team. But she will still stay involved with the AKS Office Hours. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Dave Strabel. I work on what's called our App Innovation Global Black Belt team. You can connect with me at Dave_Strabel on Twitter. Anyone new to Office Hours, we probably have a lot of people that are attend these. We host them, but those of you new, why we do Office Hours is really provide our AKS customers with updates pertaining to AKS, but also the cloud native ecosystem. Typically, we hold a short talk and a demo related to these different technologies, but the ultimate goal is really to also collect feedback from customers on issues, blockers, different use cases they have, and just general questions related to AKS. So feel free to, ask questions in the chat. We typically have a few of us on from the GBB team or even others within Microsoft. So for today, we're going to do some AKS updates. Today is actually going to be probably a short meeting because we were going to do Open Service Mesh with the product group, but there was a last minute cancellation out sick. So we'll really just provide some updates and then we'll go into the Ask Us Anything. Ask Us Anything is really bring up any questions you may have related to AKS or even things within the cloud native ecosystem. This meeting is meant to be a two-way interaction, so please stay on mute if you're not speaking. But if you want to come off mute, ask a question, that's totally fine. Or if you want to ask it in the chat, like I mentioned, we typically have others within the chat channel that can provide answers for you. Recordings and contents will always be available post-call. We typically try to get it up within 24 hours. Sometimes that takes longer. And as always, if you have thoughts or ideas, questions, or you want to present on this call of how you're using AKS, anything that you find interesting, please feel free to reach out to us at aksofficehours@microsoft.com. So AKS updates. Like I mentioned, this is going to probably be a pretty short meeting today since our main presentation we will not be having. We'll reschedule that later. And on that was Open Service Mesh. So the AKS add-on for Open Service Mesh has gone GA. So anybody that's been using public preview, that has now gone GA and fully supported by Azure. We also released what is called Azure Container Apps. I know what we really needed was more platforms to run containers on, but Azure Container Apps really kind of takes away the management of Kubernetes. In the background, Container Apps does run on AKS. But you have really no management. You tell it, here's the apps I want to run, and it runs those apps for you. It integrates with Dapper and Kata for scaling, and then also uses Envoy for its ingress. So definitely check out the Azure Container Apps. Like says it's in public preview today. It was just announced at Ignite. We will be doing a full session on the Azure Container Apps, probably I think the first week of December. To note, AKS 1.19 will be deprecated at the end of January. So if you are on that version, you're going to want to start planning that upgrade to a newer version. Auto upgrade has also went GA. So if you want to enable auto upgrade for your clusters, you can now do that. That was, I believe, just released in our last release last week. Some changes you might notice is our tunnel front is also changing. There's been kind of a lot of iterations over the years of how tunnel front works. So that tunnel front is how your nodes connect back to the managed control plane in AKS. So you will see that it's rolling out over the rest of the calendar year. So it's not like, hey, you're going to get this next week. It's more of a very slow, much slower rollout. Um, and I believe there's only a couple regions that started rolling out to. I know one of the Canadian data centers that started rolling out to, and I believe East US too. Where it's started rolling out, but that will be rolling out over the calendar year. So if you see a difference between, I think there's like 3 versions of our tunnel front that could be out there on older clusters. You'll see something just called tunnel front. Some of the other ones will be called AKS Link, and then you'll see that change to connectivity. So it's using a upstream Kubernetes proxy that's part of the Kubernetes project for that. So again, this was going to be the Open Service Mesh presentation here. So instead of doing that, I'd rather open it up for questions that you have. And this doesn't have to pertain to just Open Service Mesh. We can go ahead and take any questions just in general. Right, who's going to be the first with questions?
Hey, Dave, this is Roger Sass. Thanks. Just a quick question. You mentioned the tunnel front is being replaced. What's the reason, or what's the benefit, if any, that we should be looking for?
Really, it comes down to reliability and utilizing something that is supported upstream.
Okay.
Some of the issues before, especially with tunnel front, was the availability of it. It should improve availability of that connection back to the control plane.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Let's see. We got a couple questions in the chat here. When is Open Service Mesh working for Windows nodes? That's a good question. I think it's still a little ways out. Part of that was a big part of that is really having Envoy at a stable state for Windows containers. So I think you'll probably not really see something for Open Service Mesh working for Windows nodes probably for at least a good 6 months till we see a decent preview on there. We'll probably do a private preview before that with the Open Service Mesh AKS add-on. But it's still some time to get. And look, Alice is answering questions for me. Thank you, Alice.
You're welcome, Dave. There's a few details on that OSM issue. Looks like they have a few child issues that they're working on, and you can click through and see what they're doing. So yeah, it looks like it's been in progress for a few months.
See, anything else? Questions in here?
What's your thoughts on ACA compared to AKS?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think you're probably going to see, like, if you went out there today and used ACA, and for those, like, I know we use a lot of acronyms within Microsoft. ACA stands for the Azure Container Apps. There's going to be you're going to see a little lack of features. Where I think it fits well is when you don't want to manage all the Kubernetes components and you just want to use in these built-in constructs. It's going to provide typically the customers that need like the ultimate flexibility of utilizing any of the like open source ecosystem components and need more control over infrastructure, Azure Container Apps probably won't fit that. But I think, like, especially future looking, is a lot of customers don't want to manage any of those Kubernetes components. They want to utilize something that's portable, and that's one of the goals of Azure Container Apps, by utilizing open source components that you can deploy, to Kubernetes. So if you do get into where you want to have that more flexibility, that it should be pretty easy to port over from Azure Container Apps into like Kubernetes, and using those components like Dapper and Kata within, AKS.
Do you think ACA is going to replace ACI as the virtual node in AKS?
Oh, you got a lot of good questions today. I don't, there's not plans of right now of doing that. I think it could be definitely an interesting scenario there. There could be some gotchas, just because like ACA is not going to definitely support all those things that you may run there, where ACI is very kind of raw, just here's a container. So it kind of fits that virtual node concept very well. I think you may start like, especially when we start adding more of these add-ons into AKS, like right now in progress are the Dapper add-on and Kata add-on. So those will be coming to AKS. So I look at it more as, do you want to manage and support Kubernetes because you're building a platform on top of that? Or do you want to use something that already has those built-in components? It goes to a trade-off of flexibility, really.
So I have a follow-up question on that. I'm supporting multiple small businesses, and the issue that I'm running into managing Kubernetes cluster themselves is lots of maintenance, and small businesses don't have that resource allocation, upgrades, and things like that. So with Azure Container Apps, do you, you said basically abstracting cluster, so does it always run on the latest, or what Kubernetes engine does it run underneath?
So that's really an implementation detail you shouldn't care about within Azure Container Apps, because the whole Kubernetes part is abstracted from you.
Right. So then that's perfect, because I don't want to manage that, right? So if it's managed by you, well, with constant upgrades, I have other things to take care of. So then that underneath layer of Kubernetes cluster is, I guess you guys decide which one is running under. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, because you're not utilizing it, like the whole Kubernetes construct is totally abstracted from you. I mean, we could replace that, like, replace it with some other implementation underneath. And it should be something you don't care about. The thing you care about is like running your application and using those different constructs that we built in with like Dapper and Kata for being able to scale, based on HTTP request, or there's a number of other type of scalers within Kata. So I could, scale based on, like pub sub metric there. So really think about it as really an entire abstraction layer above Kubernetes. You shouldn't really think of it as Kubernetes.
Right. So it then becomes proprietary, sort of speak to what you guys.
I wouldn't say proprietary, because the main components within there, like Dapper and Kata, like your portability layer is really that container. Right. And then the components you're using in there are not proprietary components, they're open source components. So if I use Dapper for, MTLS, or using Dapper for my secrets management, that's totally portable to another environment. That other environment being, if you want to move to, say, GCP and run a, Dapper and Kata on GKE, you could totally do that. So it gives you, and we will be providing more documentation guidance of, how you would move from something like Azure Container Apps into Kubernetes and make that more of a seamless migration. So I don't really look at it as proprietary there, because a lot of it's abstracted, but it's still utilizing those open source components that you could run on your own. We're just running them for you within Azure Container Apps.
Thank you. I think that's.
And Alice, if you have any thoughts too on this, I would love to hear.
Yeah, I know. I think that was pretty well described. I think that to Dave's point, like, it's all using open source technology under the hood, meaning that and if you talk to the product group on this, their position is, they're kind of standing on the backs of giants in terms of like, they would never be able to just develop something like a Kata or an Envoy themselves, but with the open source community has been able to do that. And so they can use all these open source projects and provide like Microsoft supported versions of those, which is pretty cool. But then, you're not going to have access to the Kubernetes API. So if you need specific things like CRDs on your cluster, or if you have specific scenarios right now that like compute scenarios, like there's no GPU supported today, no Windows nodes, things like that. Like there just will be some limitations in terms of, how much stuff from an internal Microsoft perspective we're willing to support. And I think that's when you would sort of break glass out of container apps into something like an AKS. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate it. Again, I've been trying to, like I said, support smaller businesses, and that's the biggest thing that I'm running with them is the resource allocation. It seems like this can be something helpful for them to get out of the clusters maintenance. So I appreciate it. Thank you. And if you have any links or videos or demonstration about that product, would be great, so I can pass it along as well. Thank you.
For sure. Yeah, and I see, Richard, your point in the chat here around like Kubernetes YAML. This is like definitely being talked about. Like the team wants to make a really good developer experience for container apps. We're already talking about creating like a CLI option for like Dapper component migration. So right now the Dapper components have to be slightly different when you're deploying Dapper on AKS or like a Kubernetes cluster versus container apps. And so we're in talks about that. So that's a great feature. There also is a public Azure Container Apps Git repo. I can post it in the chat, and like these features would be awesome to post on there. I see someone has their hand up. I don't know.
Hey, this is Raj. Great session as always, guys. But one question: I recently came across a post from Liz Rice, and she mentioned about the eBPF sidecarless service mesh, right? Especially through Cilium. Is there any discussion around in AKS to support such a model?
Oh, I'm going to let Alice answer this because she's actually been dealing a lot with.
Thanks, Dave. I didn't know yeah. There's a feature, Raj, on the roadmap to support a AKS cluster without a network plugin installed. So we've been getting a lot of feature requests around Cilium from various customers who, and I don't specifically know if this is a Cilium feature you meant, but yeah, like for instance, in order to run a full Cilium network plugin, as well as it manages the IPAM, it manages the like network address allocation, things like that. That's been a feature request for a while. Obviously because we're not managing that network plugin for you, yeah, the BYOCNI, exactly.
But there are two parts.
Okay.
No, sorry, please go ahead.
No, I just was going to say that it would be a lot more like work to manage from the customer cluster standpoint, because you're managing that CNI. But if you want to take on the responsibility, then that will be an option in the future.
Got it. I think what was particularly interesting about that post, Alice, is that it talks about for example, one of the challenges with service mesh today is that you have the resource utilization of all the sidecars, right? And what eBPF does is that it you don't have to have these individual sidecars, and rather eBPF manages a single sidecar per node, as I understand it. So it significantly reduces the resource utilization on the AKS cluster, right? while giving you the service mesh benefits. And that particularly was what I was looking for.
Okay, and that was, so was Liz Rice talking about this with respect to a Cilium feature, or was she just meaning like, because there's like a multi-clustering feature within Cilium, but that's not what you mean.
That's not what I mean. I actually posted the link. I was Googling as we were talking. I just posted the link as well. Maybe I'll follow up with you later. It'll be an interesting thing to see what AKS position is on this.
Yeah, and I know we are invested in especially bringing more, the eBPF type features into the Azure CNI. So there is work being done there. I don't have any dates or details around it. It's probably something we probably in a future session could have the CNI product team who manages the CNI plugin and do a conversation with them. I know they would love to get feedback from customers on future features going forward. So I'll definitely put that on the list of sessions.
Thank you.
All right, there is a question in the chat. Random issue at pod startup with DNS lookup delay before kicking in. I can't say I have really seen this. It's probably something that would have to get more into troubleshooting scenarios with this, but I have definitely not seen that issue yet. Alice, have you ever?
Sorry, just reading. DNS lookup delay working is comment. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done some Googling on this, but I can't find anything really relevant to it. So again, I just wonder if it was, anyone knew if it was common.
Are you using custom DNS?
Worked around it, but it seems like there would be a configuration to probably address it.
Greg, are you using custom DNS yourself? Like, is it something around that?
No. It's just pretty much very vanilla AKS. Out of the box, I'm just, dumping in Alpine Ubuntu images, and it is very random, but it does happen enough that I've had to account for it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of that one. Sorry.
So one thing I would mention, Greg, if you are having that issue, it's definitely something support can look at. But also I would put an issue in the AKS GitHub repo because there is essentially internally we do monitor that quite frequently.
Okay.
And essentially have a team that manages those GitHub issues. So definitely a good place to also put it, even when you're contacting support. Just because you get a wider audience that will see that issue too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can you throw the link for that out just to go look? Thanks.
All right. What other questions do we have? I think we have answered all the ones in the chat.
So, Dave, will there be a session on service operator? At least, is that worth adding?
Yeah, I think so. We just had the version 2. I will say for like the service operator, I think this goes, every cloud provider essentially has their kind of service operator. For those of you who are not familiar with the service operator, essentially allows you to use the Kubernetes API to provision out other type of Azure resources. So part of like, say I have a Helm chart and one of the dependencies is to create a Postgres data, like manage Postgres database. I can describe that in a CRD and use the Kubernetes API to actually deploy that, and it hands over some of like the connection strings in that. I haven't seen a lot of customers use it. I think a lot of times what customers run into with like these service operators is like all the additional features that get added to these managed services that aren't available within that service operator. It's hard to keep update those service operators for every, type of data service within Azure to keep those updated. And it does lack, the whole model has kind of lacked, I would say, for the last, few years that people have been trying to use this type of model, is like the day two operations. And a lot of times it's separation of concerns too, where you may have a database team that manages all that kind of database admin stuff. Where we have seen it, customers utilize it, is in more kind of like sandbox and development environments where a developer wants to easily deploy a managed SQL database on there to do testing against. But it is definitely, I think, an interesting topic. So I will definitely put that in the notes so we can get that one added. There's another question, codeless monitoring. So getting distributed tracing with App Insights supported on AKS and OSM. I think today it doesn't. The App Insights doesn't have that full integration to do codeless distributed tracing there. But I believe that's something that is being worked on. But I know like today that is not there. We do provide some guidance around like the OSM features because it does have like those distributed tracing type features. But right now it's really here, deploy your own, Jaeger environment to do that distributed tracing. Great. We have another question. Upgrading AKS and setting up Max Surge. It looks like Max Surge is not getting used during the upgrade. Set up Max Surge first and then upgrade to AKS. Yes, you would need to set up the Max Surge before doing that upgrade. And then it should take effect and you should be able, if you set the Max Surge to 10, it should be able to update 10 nodes at a time.
Okay, so I was doing it in the same pull request. I had both these changes, Max Surge as well as upgrading the AKS. So the Max Surge was getting ignored.
Okay, yeah. You should make sure you do like the AKS update to set that Max Surge and then go through that upgrade.
Okay.
All right. Do we have any other questions out there? All right. If we do not have any other questions, we'll end early today. And sorry about the last minute cancellation, but we'll get Open Service Mesh back on the agenda. The next one will actually be having Linkerd. They'll be presenting on Service Mesh in general. And following that, we'll probably have, I believe the December 2nd one, we'll probably be having a container apps discussion then. I know there was a couple comments on future suggestions on topics around service operator, around just our, networking product team. Those will get on the agenda also for upcoming ones. And thanks everybody for joining today.